Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today, I have a special local guest, Traci Carson. Traci Carson is a Longmont accountant, mother of three, wife, dreamer, empty nester, and now a real estate investor and flipper. Traci, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I really appreciated your bio because it felt like it was coming from such a personal place. And I know as a fellow parent and somebody who spent a lot of time nurturing, especially when the kids were so little, like it was more nurturing them than business and all of that. And then you get to this point, and my wife is the same way with her career of like, she was a stay-at-home mom. And then now she's just addicted to working in a good way. I mean, I can see her she is so fulfilled with what she does. So before we get into, exactly what kind of led you to here on the show is I would love to hear more about your recent move into real estate. But tell us a little bit more about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? Were you in it did you grow up in an entrepreneurial family? What led you to accounting? That sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah. I was born in North Dakota, grew up in South Dakota, went to school in Minnesota, but desired to live in Colorado. So ended up here, right after college. My dad was an elementary school principal, and my mom a nurse. So I definitely was in the parents have a career, and that's the path that you should probably be working toward. My sister went into nursing, which followed my mom's path. I just had really no desire to do that. Like most kids in college, you just kind of try to figure out what is a decent direction that you might head toward. I'm really good at math. And so accounting, finance was actually my degree, was sort of the direction that I thought was kind of natural. I ended up in a banking career and then banking wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So I ended up in a real estate closing company, a title company doing real estate closings. Mm-hmm. And that sort of got me a little bit more interested in real estate. I'd always had a desire just to, I'd look through magazines, I'd go to open houses. So real estate was always kind of right in the forefront of my mind, but never something that I thought that I would ever pursue. My husband now, on the other hand, comes from a very entrepreneurial family. His dad owned a business his whole life. And so that was my husband's dream, always to be entrepreneurial. And he has been able to fulfill that. So as soon as we got married, he wanted to buy a business and start that direction. So I got the feel for doing something on my own we've been married 24 years. Over the last 24 years, as we've had some successes in business, and I've watched him fulfill his dreams of being a business owner and a successful business. We then raised our kids, which 20 years passes so fast, doing that, and was able to expand my accounting career, and that worked really well for being what I always called myself, a stay-at-home mom, even though I was working. But then once now that the kids are out of the house in general, we have one at home, but two of them are off at college. I've been able to kind of spread my wings a little bit and kind of look back and say, what are some things that I've wanted to do that maybe the timing just wasn't right, and having the support of my husband and seeing his dreams come true, I've been able to kind of just move forward a little bit in seeing some of these things that I've been thinking about kind of come to fruition.
So when did you start thinking about this idea that you were going to buy an older house, it needed a ton of work, and you had a vision for it? Like, where did that come from? Was it a lot of HGTV stuff, or was it a combination of that? And then also, like you talked about, you worked in the title company, the land, where they're doing real estate transactions, and were you speaking with developers or real estate investors, kind of like yourself now, and seeing the success and that sort of thing, and just being inspired by that?
Yeah, really in the title world, I just kind of got my feet wet and just kind of understanding how transactions happened. We actually lived in Vail at the time that I was in that real estate world. So, that's a whole different real estate arena even than where we're at now, here in Longmont. And yeah, so certainly seeing the beautiful houses that are built, and being able to I don't know, just watch transactions happen. So sort of that kind of got me at least interested in real estate. And in fact, my husband and I owned we bought, right after we got married, we bought an old condo up in Vail, and we ended up just renting it out, and just because I think timing wise it wasn't the time for me to do any sort of a remodel. But it was a mess, and we were actually laughing last night saying, man, that would have been a great opportunity for me to be able to do that. That would have been 20 some years ago. But that it just wasn't, it was more for a rental at that point. Then I think, and my husband jokes with me because I joined Planet Fitness so that I could watch the TVs. We're too cheap to have cable, but Planet Fitness is $10 a month, and I could go and watch all my HGTV shows. So yeah, I sort of got addicted to HGTV, and I think that's sort of inspired me to think that I could actually do it. I think there's probably a lot of us out there that watch HGTV and think, man, I could certainly do that. And I actually came to the point where I thought I really can do this, and I had support from my husband. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So once hubby kind of gave you the go, and you were ready to go with all that, and you were actually ready, then how did you start? I mean, how did you find the realtor? What were you looking for in your realtor when you were searching through the process? Did it feel like you were sort of a fish out of water at the beginning?
Yes, certainly a little bit. And the way that we found our realtor was, it was a couple years ago, actually driving to the flower bin on Mother's Day for just to pick up some flowers, and there was an open house sign, and Marilyn was actually she had actually been showing a house, and she was actually picking up the sign for the open house because it was over, and we just stopped and said, oh, would you mind going back and letting us look at it? And she said, well, this one is really not, this is something where you're really going to have to do a lot of work. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds like fun. So she wasn't able to show it to us that day, but I made an appointment with her, and she walked me through it within the next week or so, and it just got my wheels turning. That project would have been way outside my scope of being a beginner. But it got me to thinking that maybe it was something that I could do, and got my husband willing to take a look at it with me, and saying, if you're willing to put in the time and the energy, yeah, we certainly would take a look at doing something. This might be the one that's out, this is a little bit out of scope right now, but we're willing to kind of take a look at what else might be out there. So really it was over the next couple of years. And Marilyn just had, just put me on her list. And as things came up, she would send me things to go and look at. And we probably looked at about four or five different properties over the last couple of years. And I had found one that I actually made an offer on, but and I don't want to throw my husband under the bus. He's very supportive, but he also was very nervous about me jumping into something that I was not experienced at. I think he fully trusts me, but it's putting a lot of money at risk. Even though real estate tends to not be quite as risky, but it certainly has its risks involved, and being, just having to go through all of the contractors, and just an area that I have some knowledge of, but had not had experience in. So put in an offer on one, but actually prayed that night that the offer wouldn't be accepted because he wasn't overly excited about it. But but through that, we, over the next then couple months, there were a couple other houses that came up. He went and looked at them with me, and we just started having more of a conversation that said, I'm starting to trust that you understand kind of what's happening. Got some encouragement from some other friends that said, you need to let your wife go about her dreams and try to do this. And he came around. And so the last house, the house that we ended up buying, was one that just came about, and we had looked at the house next door. And it definitely needed fixing up, but it wasn't one where I walked in and said, oh, I have a vision for this. But on the MLS listing, it had a note that said, if you really want a project, buy the house next door along with this. Mm-hmm. And so I asked Marilyn to kind of keep tabs on it because it wasn't on the market yet. And so she stayed with it and contacted the people that were involved with the house that we ended up buying. And I was actually able to even to put in my offer even before it went on the market. So Marilyn did really well for me.
Yeah. Well, you did too. I mean, honestly, half of it comes from people looking into I always say half of it is the client. So in your position, I would say you're the client, and that, the owner rather, half of the vision comes from them, and you being keen to looking at that little note, and then, prodding your realtor to be on top of that. What would you describe as maybe you could clarify the difference between, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Traci, was I think the fact that you went out and did this, and then I looked at the project, and as an award-winning architect, I'm looking at this going like, this is amazing. Like, holy cow, who is this gal? And I just love stories like your story about trying things for the first time. You sound like the type of person that doesn't live their life in fear, and I really appreciate people like that in the world. So for people listening who are maybe are thinking about possibly doing this in their, to make this kind of a leap, what is the difference between a beginner's project, something that is digestible, versus something where you're like, holy crap, this is way too much for me to bite off? Like, what are some of the things you looked for?
Yeah. So if I'm comparing kind of that first house that I looked at, that I had desire to do, and then the house that we ended up doing, I think a lot of it was just the scope of how big the house was. So the house that we ended up getting I'd say was relatively small, a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. So I didn't have to make a lot of decisions about a lot of space. There were a lot of things that I could have done differently in the house, but I kept saying, this is my first project. This is my first project. I need to think smart. So specifically, one of the things that the laundry in the house that we bought, the laundry area was in the basement. And there was room up on the main level to maybe move that up, but then that was adding additional plumbing and changing the space a little bit. So even though that might have been something in the long run that would have been of value, it also was okay to leave it where it was and not go through the changes that might have needed to be made for that. It would have also been nice to build a second bathroom, maybe off of the main bedroom. But again, then you have the plumbing, you have extra walls, you have extra framing. And again, not that those things were not doable, but in talking to realtors and other people who have done fixer-uppers, and just kind of what are some of the things that people would be looking for, you just start analyzing what you could leave out because it may not have the ultimate effect that you think you want. And my next project, I might put in that extra bathroom because now I understand a little bit more about the plumbing and how much work would be involved with that. And, so I think it was trying to make sure that I limited my scope, not dreaming too big, and then working within my project. So the only thing that I really did, I opened up a couple of doorways and I turned the bathroom. The bathroom entrance had been in the kitchen. And so I moved that so that it wasn't quite that awkward. I'm still a little bit awkward because it was in the dining room, but instead of having to move the full bathroom, leaving it where it was and trying to work within the scope that I had. So I think those were a few of the things just to kind of keep it in kind of in my wheelhouse. There were some things I had a friend say, if you can't fix it, feature it. And so instead of going through all of the headache to try to really fix something that maybe would have been ideal, how can you feature it and make it a little bit different? So there was a register that came through the bathroom that actually had some asbestos tape on it. And I wanted to open up a wall, but where the register came out, I would have had to have moved that, even move it a foot would have caused me to have the asbestos abated, would have caused, some things underneath the house that would have had to have been moved. So significant cost just to open up a doorway a little bit. So I ended up opening up the doorway up to the register and then opening a space above that register in order to make it still feel like it was open. But didn't have to move the register, didn't have to do any of the abatement of the asbestos. So just thinking about things that you don't have to do in order to make it look good. So again, if you can't fix it, feature it. So if you don't want to fix it, feature it in some other way. So those were just kind of some of the creative ideas that I had to come up with. Also thinking about, what was my budget and where did I want to put those things, and really doing my research and figuring out how much were things going to cost ahead of time, and then limiting where I needed to put those resources in order to make it come out.
I have to imagine that your accounting background played into that a little bit, right? The budget. I mean, I feel like that's where you sort of had a leg up maybe in other folks, is you were just, you live spreadsheets and
Yes.
could really tackle that. So how did you come up with a budget? I mean, again, was this more of you talking with other realtors? Maybe it was Marilyn too, of saying like, look, you're going to buy it for this. Let's say you do X, Y, and Z. Then you could probably sell it for this, and then, figuring out profit margins. I mean, how did that all coalesce and come together? I think that's one of the biggest probably fear factors after all of the stuff that you already described, Traci, like knowing your limits. But
Yeah.
how do you wrap your arms around that problem?
Yeah. And that was a big concern for my husband. So I definitely had to make sure that I was, staying within budget, which I ended up not staying within my budget. I did end up going over a little bit, but I felt okay with that based on how the market was moving. So yeah, it was interesting because Marilyn, actually not on this house, but on the house next door, we had kind of walked through what are some of the expected costs. And so she had offered some of her knowledge of the market, to kind of help me get started with that. And then it was really just, a lot of it was just putting in, requests for bids from different contractors for the various things that I knew needed to come up, and just finding out what was the range of the things that I needed to do, and not making a decision to hire a contractor until I had those bids in place. And I did some research on my own. There's a lot of information on Google, Home Depot, Lowe's budget. You can get a lot of cost estimates, but I had to do a lot of that myself. And also talking to other realtors, and then our friend that does some other fixer-uppers, and just they'd kind of thrown out just estimates of what it would cost to do these various things, and I just took those into account, kind of, took all of those into account, found a kind of found an average, but put a lot. I mean, it does take a lot of research and asking for bids, which I found that I was not, I'd asked for the bids and that was fine. All of the contractors that I worked with, and that I got bids from, were amazing. And I wanted to hire all of them because they all seemed fair, and they, so I ended up having to make decisions, and a lot of it was based on what their, kind of what their bottom line was, because most of the things came in pretty close. So that was how the process went.
Can you break down the numbers for us? So how did you know that this house that you bought was the right price? Because like, how much of that stuff were you figuring out before before you even felt comfortable putting in the offer. How did that work? Chicken before the egg sort of thing.
Yeah. Certainly not knowing what the market was going to do. And certainly I have to say that the market over the last 6 months certainly helped us out in the sale. And I couldn't necessarily anticipate that. But I think the kind of the 2 years that I was looking at properties, and just seeing what things would go for, and actually even when I looked at some of those properties, I kind of thought that they were overpriced, but Marilyn kept saying, well, they'll get that. And so she understood the market. And so I relied a lot on her understanding of where the market was going to go. And knowing that if I bought this, which I ended up being they wanted to put it on the market at $325, and I was able to end up in the long run, got it for $308. And then I thought that if I put 75 to 100,000 into it, I would do fine. Now I have to say that my thinking might have been a little bit different than a normal real estate investor. My husband and I had kind of a deal where he had been able to do some of his dreams. I mean, his business. He also has this desire for owning bucking bulls. And so we had made a deal. So we gave him a certain amount of money that he could spend. And we went into it thinking, well, if he makes money on it, great. But if he doesn't, this is just his pastime and his hobby. And we're okay with that. So we kind of came to the decision that if I did this, and even if I ended up losing $25,000, it was going to be okay because I got the experience to do this. Now, not everybody has the ability to do that. And certainly as an investor, you probably don't want to go into it thinking that if I lose 25,000, I'm going to be okay. But it was kind of a dream and kind of a willingness that we had to do that. So even as I put my budget together, I thought, okay, if I put 100,000 into it and able to sell it for, we kind of thought 425. And again, got a lot of the information from Maryland with how things had, people who had fixed things up, what was the square footage price that they were getting for that. And so at 450, that 450,000, that was going to be within that range of where people were getting what they were getting for fixed up properties. And so that I would have probably broken even, obviously having to pay realtors commissions. Yeah. So I was very comfortable with those numbers. So then when the market really over the last 6 months, over the last year, really changed, and in the long run, we ended up walking away with a $60,000 profit. Amazing. Which is, which when you're thinking of going in with a $25,000 loss, it's an exciting place to end up. Absolutely.
So how much did you end up putting in originally?
So I ended up, I bought it for 308, and then I ended up putting in 110. Was it 100? I think it went up to 120. It was 120 by the time I was done. So, yeah.
Still, 50% profit is phenomenal. Who can complain about that? That's amazing. Maybe this would be a good point where I'm hoping what we could do, as I asked you before we started, is I would love to kind of walk people through your project, so to speak. So if we could just take a look at some photos online, with the listing, with the original listing, and then just tell us about it. So because it's a beautiful project, and that's really what kind of led me to you was I was just intrigued by. So everybody who's seeing this is the front of the house. And then they had these beautiful renderings put together to kind of give them an idea of what it should look like. What was first question I wanted to ask you with these photos is did you know that this sort of thing existed before you guys were putting it online, or were you thankful at the end if you didn't know that and we're like, oh, good. Then we can project what it's going to look like.
Yeah, no, I had no idea that it could be done. In fact, I and then I found out you could do staging, this way as well. Although I loved the staging that I had done in the house, and she did a fabulous job. So yeah, it was great to be able to see what it looked like, because obviously selling it in March, which actually for me was really nice. I didn't have to do the yard, but you're able to see what it could look like with all of that taken care of. And yeah, it beautified it immensely.
What did you do to the outside? Total repaint job? Was the roof good? How about that?
Yeah, so the roof was fine, but I did have it replaced because it had a green tint to it, and I didn't really want that to be the theme. Although the garage in the back, I left the shingles on before, so those still have kind of the green tint on them. And then the siding was an asbestos shingle siding. So actually just had this, this is a James Hardy vertical siding that was just that, and he just had them put that over the top of it. And I've had just over the last several years, I just love the vertical siding look. And then it's kind of the white and the black theme with a pop of color has been kind of my desire. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to go for. And so the roof is black, and then the trim is a real dark gray. They didn't have a black color, but a real dark gray. And it's kind of fun because I think it really fits the structure of the house. Plus, looking around that neighborhood, which I love that neighborhood because it's just very eclectic. You can kind of do a whole lot of different things. There's not another house that has the vertical siding, so it stands out a little bit, and yet it still fits in with what else is around it. So it doesn't stand out in an awful way.
It's adorable. It's adorable. Yeah. It's clean. It's modern. Tell me about where did the turquoise idea come from? Because some people are picking all different kinds, but what led you to turquoise? Yeah.
So I wanted to do something that did sort of blend with the shingles on the roof on the garage. It blends a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to pick colors especially in the sunlight. But I love blue. It's kind of been my favorite color as well. And so that color just seemed to pop when I held it up there. So that Beautiful. Was yeah.
It really stands out. I mean, it's just very welcoming. It's just like a almost a perfect soft color, but it's still punchy.
Yeah.
So, and then you even translated that to the inside. As we walk through, so this is the front sort of area. What kind of work was done in here? Was it all new trim, or was it just all plaster and paint, carpet?
Yeah, so in here really didn't have to do a whole lot. The windows were the windows, which are beautiful, were there, and I replaced the front door, and then actually put in the indoor outdoor carpet. It didn't have anything in there before, and then painted a different color and changed the light. So it was very much a cosmetic thing in that room. But yeah, it's so bright, and yeah, I think that the gal who bought it, I think she's gonna love spending time out there, especially in the mornings when the sun's not too bright in there.
Yeah, 100%. How about moving inside then? Did you, the hardwood looks, is that original? And then did you guys refinish it, or is it?
Yeah, so it was, yep, it's original. I don't know exactly when it was put in, but yeah, it was what was left in the house. And it has some character lines in it. But yeah, it was redone, and the people who redid it did a fabulous job. And I just picked I guess it's kind of a gray color, just to kind of go with the trendy kind of gray that's happening right now on the walls and stuff. But it seemed to fit because it still kind of felt like it was old. I don't want to say it's distressed looking, but that was kind of the feel that I got when I picked that color.
It's got a nice patina to it, and I think it ties everything together for sure. So for everybody watching, again, is this all the furniture? Is that real furniture, or is that staged virtually?
This is real furniture.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. She did a fabulous job there. So in here, there was an old wood stove that sat really almost in the middle of the room, and then had a big chimney outcropping out between those windows. So although it would still have been nice to have a chimney or to have a fireplace in there, obviously the wood stove was not going to be the thing. And you know, kind of again, thinking about the scope, I think it would just been it would have been a lot harder for me to get a fireplace put in there. So I just decided to just close it up and, you know, let the next person decide to do that if that was what they wanted to do.
Sure. Yeah. One of the best parts though, I like is when I get into this area. This is where it really kind of hit me, and I go like, wow, this gal is onto something. So what is new brick? What is old brick? You know, are you playing off of the old brick? Did you gut the whole kitchen?
Exactly. So yeah, the whole kitchen was gutted. And in fact, that brick was not exposed. So it was hidden behind the drywall. And in the basement, you know, you saw that there was the brick goes down into the basement. It was the chimney flue. So we started to take off, and our oldest son was my demo guy, and so he started taking it off, and the drywall was it was thick, and it was like cement. And so we started on the inside, on the dining room side, and he's like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to get through this, and we don't even know what it's going to look like. But then once we got over to the kitchen side, that was a lath and plaster, and so it peeled off a lot easier. And so as he pulled off the stuff on that side, we saw how beautiful that brick was. And so we're like, yeah, we have to open up the whole wall around it and make it a feature. So yeah, he got that completely exposed, and then I washed it down with basically a salt and water and soap mix. And so I was able to get all the crumbliness off and really shined it up. So then that, of course, then did become kind of the focal area. And how was I going to choose what was going to go in there? I wanted it to look a little farmhousey, a little bit old, but yet wanted it to feel, you know, modern and kind of fun. So the tile that I chose kind of does have some of the brick quality to it. It's kind of I loved that tile when I saw it, and it does have some of that brick color. So I used that around there, and I wanted to keep it light because it's a good sized kitchen, but it is, you know, it's a galley kitchen, and that's gonna keep it kind of feeling more closed in and darker. So I wanted to keep it light with the light cabinets and kind of the fun sparkly lights.
What is it? It's so interesting. Like, I don't know if I'd be able to tie a room together like you can tie a room together, because like the thing that puts me over the edge with this one, especially besides the brick, is and then I look at all the little fixtures, and you're like, oh my gosh, it all works together. They're delicate, but they're a little bit gritty. Just like the brick, right? Delicate, but a little bit gritty. Same thing with the herringbone. Like, so I can't imagine you had any software, and I could be wrong. So how were you able to get past the fear zone of being afraid that everything wasn't coming together? I mean, unpack that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think you just have to get over that fear. I think I do have some of that where I lack confidence because I haven't done this. Okay, so one of the things that was kind of a blessing in terms of the cabinets, kind of a little secret. My husband's business, or I guess our business, is called Repurposed Materials, and we get products from lots of places in industry. It happened to be that a cabinet company was selling out of this particular cabinet line. It's a 2019 line, and we got 5 truckloads of cabinets that I was able to pull from whatever I wanted to. So I designed my kitchen on grid paper, just and was able to just pull cabinets, whatever I wanted to, from this source that we had. So I was able to, in fact, I ordered a few extra cabinets and then ended up being able to design it once we put the cabinets together and make sure that I had things in the right place. So I had, if something didn't feel like it worked out in that regard, I would have been able to go back and get something different. So I was able to overcome that fear because I had the products available to me. And there were a few times, like the farmhouse sink, we had some issues with that. Because it probably doesn't look like every other farmhouse sink, where it usually sticks out about 3/4 of an inch outside of the frame of the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
But we ran into some issues that I'm not going to go into, but then we were kind of rushed into getting it to coming up with a solution. And we just had to do that in order to be able to get the cabinet or the countertops measured the next day. And so some of it was just a lot of problem solving and being confident that the solution that I came up with was going to work. Because even like we came up with the solution with the sink, and the next day when the countertop person came to measure, they're like, is this really where you want the sink? And so I kind of second guessed myself, but at the same time I was like, yep, this is the decision I made, I have to go with it. So also with the tile, when it was first put up, it has a darker edge to it. And I had chosen the white grout. And so when I first saw it, and with a darker edge on it, which kind of blended a little bit more with the bricks, I was like, that is the most amazing tile I've ever seen. And then they put the white grout on it and it toned it down a little bit. And my husband walked in and he's like, oh my gosh, what happened? And so I had to kind of overcome that, where again, it wasn't the exact look that I had at the beginning and absolutely loved, but I'm okay with it because nobody else saw it when it was that way. So, and it turned out beautiful, but next time I would go with a darker grout because it would bring out the color of the tile a little bit more. So it was, making mistakes, making decisions, and then having to be confident with how those decisions ended up playing out.
Yeah. So there's another thing too that I don't know where it comes from with you, but a lot of architectural designers or architects in practice are coming up in training and everything. You from the school level and then into practice, right away. A lot of people want to do symmetry, and I don't know where you're. Is this an innate? Is this something like where does this come from? Where does this idea come from? And then there's some other images I wanted to show, because a lot of people really struggle to get that kind of learned and be comfortable with asymmetrical balance. It's a very hard thing to do. Like, even though we look symmetrical too, like we're slightly asymmetrical. Yeah. I think there's one in the bathroom here, like this move. Where does that come from for you? I mean, did you just like, how does that decision happen? Was it just a gut feeling and then it felt good?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just a gut. For some reason, it felt right. I think on that kind of that stair step tile in the kitchen, mm-hmm. that was from there was some actually in the bathroom. There were some finishes on the tile that I wasn't completely satisfied with, and I didn't want that same look to come out in the kitchen. So I thought, how can I make sure that there aren't cuts on those tiles that are going to make it look unfinished or different. So that was where I came up with the kind of that stair step idea, so that most of the tiles were a full tile, so that it was just the actual cut edge from the tile company as opposed to my tile cutter.
That's brilliant. I really like I really like that insight. Yeah.
What were you saying?
Well, I really like that insight, and that's sort of a form and function thing all coming together of like, well, believe it or not, I mean, it was slightly aesthetic, but at the same time, it was like I was trying to avoid this situation with the materials.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, bravo overall. 1040 Alta Street, Longmont. It's up on Zillow. If anybody else wants to take a look at it, just a really cool project that you put together, Traci. And again, that's why I would just. I was hoping to also just give you the opportunity to talk about your work, because come on. I mean, for you to do this and get it going and be profitable and everything. I just hope maybe you'll share it with folks and friends and everything, and they can see like, look, here's my explanation of what we did. Not enough people get enough credit for stuff like that. And it was obviously a risk. If you could boil it down, what was your number one lesson you learned by doing this?
It's hard. I would say, well, the lesson I learned is that you do eventually have to fulfill your dreams. And I think it's great if you have the opportunities to do that, to not stand back in fear and move forward. And I know I made mistakes in what I did in the processes. But I do think just moving forward without fear as you can is a huge thing. And finding opportunities, it was great because our son was able to do a lot of the demo, and he wants to continue to try to do some of the other things, and I'd give him some other opportunities. So I think the lesson is that you just, you don't sit in where you've been. Try to keep moving forward, and whether it's for yourself or for someone else. I think it's great to be able to have that opportunity to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Since this one was a success, are you planning on continuing down this path?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. I think it's hard right now because of the market is, people are asking a lot for things that you won't be able to get as much value out of, even if you're just doing a little bit of remodeling on it. So I know that there'll be a time, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now, that either the market will change or there'll be opportunities because of people's situations. I mean, sadly, I know evictions will be happening and foreclosures will be happening, and those are probably the types of properties that you're going to look for. And so, trying to find that, I don't want to say take advantage of, but taking advantage of the market as opposed to taking advantage of people and their situation. So yeah, definitely, I would try to find something else because it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and yeah, thoroughly enjoyed the experience. So.
Beautiful. One last question I'd like to ask everybody, and it's always a curveball for folks, especially if you haven't listened to the show before, but kind of not just about what you've done with this house and being a first-time real estate investor and fixer-upper and flipper and all of that, but kind of the whole deal of you going to University of Minnesota, getting your degree, going into accounting. So knowing what you know now, right? If you could go back in time, 24 years ago, or whatever, way back in time, knowing what you know now, and if you could do that before you even started your accounting career, what is one piece of advice that you give yourself?
I would probably say, and interesting because we've talked to a lot of, millennials, stuff that are kind of, and even our kids, just going through that stage of what do I do in my life? And there's this focus to have to do the same thing forever. And I think it's to really be willing to pursue different dreams, finding some consistency and some stability, but being willing to reach out and try a bunch of different things, and not being pigeonholed into one aspect of your life. I've loved my accounting career, and I will continue to do my accounting, but there's a time for a change. And so even 24 years ago, if I would have loved to have started this 24 years ago. This would have been something, but the timing wasn't right. I didn't go to school to study interior design or architecture or anything. I just had a passion for it, but didn't understand that it's okay to follow your passions. But I also wanted to raise my family, and I wanted to be able to provide for them the same way my husband does. But then there's a time when you can pursue your dreams. So not ever letting those go to the back burner and think that they're not something that will ever happen. I think it's important. Because like I said, with the millennials are, they change jobs very often, and that's okay. And we have to be able to understand that. And my generation, I think we were kind of set in, you've got to be in one thing for your whole life, and understanding that it's okay to pursue several different things. Life is short, and we need to experience all that we can.
Yep, 100%. It's very short, and I think this last year really taught us that too. Yeah. So the timing is interesting with your message, and I would echo it 100%. Traci, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Yeah.
I think this interview will inspire other folks. I'm so glad you got to tell your story, and
Thank you.
and I hope it helps out other people in ways we can't even think about.
Yeah,
So,
me as well. So
yeah.
thank you.
Alrighty. Have a good day.
All right. You too. Thanks, Lance.
Yep. Bye.